a client?
Okay, so I've had her for years, on and off. So her history is that she had an SI joint flare up with her second pregnancy, which was nearly 4 years ago. So she was seeing an osteopath then. And I sort of spoke to this osteopath. That's how I met Emily, who's my client in Milan. Her and her husband, I trained the two of them. I was referred by the osteopath saying she needs to get strong again post-pregnancy. I've been doing all this SI joint work. And she couldn't really explain to me what she was doing. She's very much more that sort of craniosacral, not like hands-on and a bit woo-woo, but it seemed to work. So then we've not really had flare-ups. Like she gets flare-ups on and off, but we haven't had one for a while. And now she's just she's just stuck in one. But I feel like it's almost that chronic. She'll do anything that loads the area and she'll be like, oh, I've got a bad back today. And it's like, is it bad? Can we differentiate between work and hurt? And if it's hurt, why? Because we can't, like, there's no exercise that specifically triggers it. She was a semi-pro tennis player for a lot of her young adult life. So parts of her body are just hyper mobile and then parts are rigid to the point of, wow, you are a steel rod. So I appreciate, and I'll show you some of the photos, like the movements in her spine, like her lumbar spine. Like we were trying to do a side bend yesterday and it was just like this. And her lateral hip just doesn't. So she's got super, hypermobility in her hamstrings, thus then can't really find tension, has no glute, never finds glutes. Like no matter what we do, it's so rare for her to feel them. Like she might get a stretching sensation. I try to explain to her that's the first step to it working, but she's never been able to get glute DOMs, no matter what exercise we've tried, because if we try to add any different plane of motion, she feels it in her pelvis.
Okay.
So this is where I'm struggling, is that seemingly she was getting really good at hinging and she was loving deadlifts. She was loving side planks. We were trying to get load through there. And then all of a sudden now she's like, nope, don't want a side plank because I feel it. Don't want a deadlift because I feel it. And so now I'm going, I don't even know what to give you, because she doesn't like to do shoulder press that are overhead work because she's so stiff that she used to get triggers in her neck. So we can't do any of that. Doesn't like to do push-ups. Not that you need to, but there's a lot of exercises she just won't have in her program.
Okay.
So it's like, okay, but yet you want to work hard and you don't want to be bored. So this is where I'm at, is going, okay, well, how do I fix this? Like she's gotten better at learning her pelvic. She does tend to tilt into an anterior position, and I think she's noticed that does tend to trigger it.
Okay.
So she will talk about tucking her pelvis, and that takes the pressure off. And I was like, well, that is a positive. Like the fact that you can do something like that and already instantaneously feel a difference, that's huge. But why can't we keep that when we're doing the exercise? So I don't really know where to go with her now, because it just we'll have a good run for a while and then it will be like, no, bad back, can't do this.
Yeah, I can see that's super frustrating and confusing. That she's putting roadblocks in the way without seemingly fully understanding the situation. So she's like, I don't want to do this, without an actual justification for why. And I think the first thing to get clear on is what constitutes a flare-up, because in what is a flare-up in her mind might be, like you said, just the area doing something. And because she has that association of this part of my body is bad times, she just wants to go nowhere near it. But a big part of any rehab journey is the reprogramming of the nervous system to understand that movements are safe.
Yes.
So from that perspective, it's very much like a dose response problem, where you're doing the right things, but you almost need to start so low down the spectrum of specificity that you almost trick her into using that area. And then, well, we've just used it and it was fine. So clearly some dose is okay. We just need to titrate the amount to then reintegrate it, because long term you need to be able to do some of these movements to just exist as a human. So it's very much, it sounds like there's a lot of psychological side of things for her to accept and entertain the possibility of going into these shapes, and just explain to her that there will be a dose, even if it's like 1 centimeter range of motion in a hinge that you can tolerate, because you are doing, like, just standing up, you're going to be going into tiny amounts of hip flexion and extension. So it's just a matter of the amount rather than the joint motion is a no stop.
Yeah.
How does she describe her flare-ups? Like, does she have language to articulate clearly what's going on for her?
It's like it's like nothing you can touch. Like, it's not a muscle you could massage. That's why she's like, no, it doesn't feel like DOMS. It doesn't feel like, muscle work from yesterday. It feels like an ache, I guess. And she normally thinks it's always triggered by flexion rotation. Like, that's when she's like, that's the no, I can't pick up something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's always that area of, usually around that right SI.
Yeah.
Basically, that's where she's always sort of touching.
Okay. And is that flexion rotation towards, like, internal rotation?
Away from? Good question. When I was filming a few just basic, like, side bends yesterday, and she said it was actually worse to laterally flex left, which she said is normally better. She said normally she doesn't like going towards the right.
Yeah.
But yesterday, and even in her spine, I was like, wow, Jesus, you get a little bit of equal flexion or lateral flexion when you go right. When she went left, it was literally a straight line. So that I've not noticed that before in her. So yeah, she said normally it's going towards that she doesn't like. Yesterday it was a bit of both.
Yeah. So when we think about the SI joint, we're thinking about where is the space closing. So usually there will be a direction, whether you're forward folding, side bending, or rotating, where you can create space in the area that is pinching. So I would try to explore with her, with as much precision as you can, which combination of the six directions is creating that closing of the space. And then you can just do the opposite. So if it is flexion and side bend towards and rotation towards, then you can work on a more extended position and rotating away and side bending away in a very regressed setup. So rather than doing it standing, because there's more load and stability demand, you could do it half kneeling. So the kneeling lunges, have we looked at those before?
Yeah, I do those with her. She whenever she does them, she's a bit like, no, this is not that hard.
Cool.
And which is great, but yeah, you're a bit like, okay, well then are you getting enough of a stimulus? And if not, how do I bring it up to your level of challenge without overdoing it?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I know exactly the sort of client where it's like, so you say you can't do this, but we're doing this slightly less, and now you're complaining it's not enough.
So like, we did do deadlifts a couple of days ago, and she did them beautifully, but she still wants to go almost to like she does a Romanian deadlift, but she will literally want to go to the floor, and I'll be like, well, you don't need to go that low. You go to where you keep tension in your hamstrings, but she won't pull it back. And she did say, I don't think it was that. We did one version of a side plank, and she's like, oh, I'm pretty sure it was that. I felt it then. Okay. And I was like, but you were only in it for about 15 seconds. Like, I just don't think that was enough load to cause. That's why I was like, I just don't know if it was that or if it's a combination of other things. Do we just avoid that for now, even though, no,
that is tough. And I think the way I would position it with her is that we need to do a bit of investigation and detective work to, as scientifically as possible, eliminate variables. So it's almost like a game of spot the difference. So whatever you do in your sessions, make sure that it's written down, and then you just rotate out things, 1 or 2 movements max per session, to then spot the difference, basically. So if there's a session where there's no flare up, like, what did we not have side planks in that session? Did we not have, like, what was the missing ingredient that led to a better outcome? And then you can work with that as a working assumption of like, okay, this joint motion or this type of loading is what's exacerbating the symptoms. So if we reduce or remove that for a period of time, can we get stimulus into the area without aggravation, and then start to work hard in directions that are least aggravating? So if we go back to that example of the SI joint opening and closing, if you identify the least aggravating and most aggravating directions, you can use that as a progression. Like ultimately, you want to get to the most aggravating joint motions. And so rather than using load or using stability demand or anything like that, you can literally just use the combination of flexion, lateral flexion, and rotation to build up to the triggering position. And you explain it to her, like, for this part of your body, this is the way we're going to progress for now, because to make progress long term, we need to clean this up. Like I can give you a hard workout and make you do like assault bike intervals and whatever, you know. There's ways to work hard without touching these areas, but that's just looking away at from the problem rather than actually sorting it out once and for all, which is what we want to do. And it might mean a period of time where you don't feel as much progress in your fitness, but long term, it's going to enable you to lay a foundation that will end up in a better like longevity and overall results. So with the kneeling lunges, what came to mind as we were discussing it then was using a static kneeling lunge. So rather than actually lunging into it and going quite wide and staying upright and heel heavy, in that way you can get a pelvic floor stretch as well as all the hip joint motions that we're thinking about. So going through that slowly with like Pilates like breathing exercises, trying to teach her to relax and open those areas is often linked to SI joint pain. If somebody's super tight through their pelvic floor, then that side of the bottom side of the pelvis isn't going to move very well. So when combined with other motions, it can be the straw that breaks the camel's back in terms of actually compressing on something versus not. So it's worth doing a bit more experimentation there on like the length of the lunge, the width of the lunge, and even going toe out on the lunge to just create a little bit more space and get some movement in the right directions, hopefully without aggravating things. And you can actually load that fairly well with reaches, even with like a light dumbbell reach. If you set it up well, she should be able to get tension in the glute. And you can use the same loading strategies that we talk about for tweaking out the back and tweaking in the hip. For example, the diagonal opposite reach. So if we've got right foot forwards, we're reaching the left hand forwards and left and pushing the right hip back and right to create that lots of hip flexion and tweaking out the spinal flexion to create length in that area. And that, I'm optimistic, if you have the right tweaks, she should be able to get some work going through that area. And then the job is, how do we transfer those joint motions higher up the spectrum of specificity towards a deadlift? So you do like half kneeling or one leg standing, the other knee on a bench. That's a nice intermediate between the knee half on the floor. And then obviously like stagger stance variations, and then maybe full deadlifts. Sumo might be a nice bridging exercise as well to get towards RDLs or conventional deadlifts, again for that space in the pelvic floor. And you can also play with the amount of how squatty versus how hingy you make it as well. So that, those are the things that are just pinging off the top of my head as things you could explore with her. The other thing is the T-spine. If you can do some seated T-spine work with her, so you take out the pelvis from the equation and restore motion there, very often the T-spine moving better will result in the pelvis moving better.
That's what we were trying that a little while ago when we were trying to get more work, like movement through her shoulders, because I felt obviously T-spine is limiting her overhead position as well, or even just her want to. I think also from just years of tennis and probably just the force that she kept, having when she's, serving and hit, well, any of the above, I guess. I think she's just so then rigid. But I found it really hard because there's so many parts that are hypermobile and hyper stiff that it was like to do like the normal T-spine mobility. I just couldn't figure out how to do it without her overdoing certain areas or just throwing her arm around. Like she's a bit all or nothing. Like she can be hyper aware of her body in some ways and then really not body aware in others, that you're a bit like, oh, that's not at all what I wanted from you. How do I rein this in?
Yeah, good question. And yeah, I've been there. I know exactly that frustration. I think you almost have to have a reset and say that we're doing a completely different exercise. Now we're going to go super slow and focus more on the breathing as well. So when somebody is super stiff, using the same reaches that we do for the T spine and just tweaking it subtly for subtle amounts of rotation, subtle amounts of side bend, but using the breath to expand the rib cage at the same time for somebody who's super stiff in certain areas can be the thing that unlocks the range, when previously it's just too locked down. And when they use speed, because she's a tennis player, she's got a lot of experience moving her T-spine with a lot of power. So the strategies she has are well ingrained. So to give her the safety to try a new strategy, going slower, adding more points of contact, so maybe holding a door frame, holding a rig, something like that, and then gentle drivers, and almost get to the end range, and then use the breath to give the stretch reflex rather than the reach. So she can kind of be in a bit of a stretch position, whether it's side bent and rotated, whichever way, and then just say, hold that, keep reaching, and I want you to take a deep breath into whatever area of her thoracic spine and rib cage is not expanding and moving well. I think that would yield results. And then, yeah, I think as I'm describing this to you, I can see why why that personality type would struggle with it, because
it's the personality as well as the body.
Go.
Like so much she likes to do just with not even momentum, but just speed, that it's like, no, slow down. And it's just so hard for her to do that. And I think then she gets not bored, but just, she just likes to move fast. And it's like, okay, but unfortunately we can't always do that, or not when we keep getting these flare-ups, whether it's because you're not focusing for that split second and then so
totally.
I think that's why it almost is helpful. I told her I was going to talk to you. She's like, I'm pretty sure you get more irritated with my back than I do. And I was like, well, that's good to know, because I don't want you to be like, oh, sake, Elisha, like, you've done this to me again, kind of a thing.
That's good.
And I was like, I do hate it, but I was like, maybe it's good that I can then not pass the blame, but be like, so someone even higher than me has said XYZ. So I think sometimes when you've trained someone for a long time, they need to be like, oh, different idea, right, from someone else, not from you, even though I've been saying the same thing forever.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think a couple of things for people like that I've found useful are, one is changing the success criteria. So rather than the success being lifting this weight or this many reps as fast as possible, the success criteria is now getting expansion into this area of your rib cage, or getting a nice curve through the T spine. And if you can show her and really emphasize that this is a big win, like this was straight as a rod and now you've got a nice C shape coming through your T spine, this is going to help your overhead position. It's going to help your exercises that you care about, and really connect the thing that she cares about with the thing that you care about. That helps. And the other thing I was thinking of is almost striking a bargain of like, if you do this really well, then we can do that finisher that you love, or whatever it is, something that is like, you give me a bit, I give you a bit. And then she sees it as more worthwhile rather than instead of the things that she likes. But that sounds like probably the hardest part of working with somebody like that. Just getting them to actually execute the movements that they're not bought into fully. Like maybe they're not aware of the problem enough. Like the problem doesn't feel painful enough, and
no, exactly,
they don't understand the solution enough. So just trying to speak to her in the language that she likes is probably going to be a big rock to get in the jar.
It's interesting because her husband had to have back surgery last year because he had two really bad herniations, to the point that he was upright for like 24 hours. He just couldn't move until he had this surgery. And he is almost easier to train now because he went through so many years of his life being told that bending forward was bad for him. So he just stopped doing it. So he adopted these ridiculous movement patterns. Whenever he tried to lean over to pick up something, it was a squat and a shift and so having to re-educate him, no, that's not actually bad for you. That it's bad that you've not been doing that. He's now will do a million things that his wife won't. And I'm like, maybe we should train together. So you can look at him and be like, oh, that's not a bad thing to do. Yeah, it's so interesting, the two of them, because they're so similar but yet so different. And I was trying to explain to her, similar to him, and that his pain initially was coming from this movement avoidance. And fine, yes, okay, then the disc really badly herniated, and the only solution was surgery. But prior to that, part of the reason why he was in so much pain is because he just wasn't moving from where he should have. I think I've talked to you about him before. Like, his calves were his glutes and hamstrings. Like, they just did everything. And I was trying to explain to her that he's similar sort of idea, and she's like, no, but I saw his MRI, like I saw how bad the disc was. And I was like, no, I'm not saying that he didn't have a bad disc herniation. I'm just saying that he wasn't doing all these movements, which eventually led to, needing this surgery. And I'm not saying that's what is going to happen. It's just that we need to keep trying to find ways to get you to move into these positions that you keep wanting to avoid, because other things just keep getting overloaded.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Spot on. To explain.
Yeah, it is hard to get that message through, and sad reality is a lot of people don't give a shit until they get that injury or they have that surgery, and then it's really brought to their attention in a way they cannot ignore. And you can like say that to her, just like, look, I know about this. I've worked with other people, including your husband. I don't want it to get to that point. So I heavily recommend doing some of this stuff, or increasing the proportion of this stuff, because that will keep us in the safe zone for longer. You'll actually be able to train harder overall. If we look at months and years, it's actually going to mean you can train harder than if you don't do this, because if we're constantly removing exercises that allow you to push your threshold, we extrapolate that out, your training looks really bad in 1, 3, 5 years time. Whereas if we nip it in the bud and get on top of it early, then actually the next few years of training looks way better. And therefore the results that you really care about will be more achievable than, if we just keep trying to find that one way that doesn't trigger pain, that gets you a hard workout today. Try to keep the bigger picture in mind. Is there anything else on that? Is that helpful? Does that give you some ideas?
It is. I think it's just, I must need to, I don't know. It's hard when you're not face to face as well, because it's like you just want to be going, no, this exact bit, move this. And it's like, I can't do that. So it's, trying to put in those parameters, like you said, of going, okay, I need success by making sure she does this. But sometimes online, it's like, no, that's not quite the direction. And I don't know how to. That's just maybe having to rein it in even more. That's why I was, I think last week we did even just some split squats, and I was like, how was that? She was like, yeah, fine, just boring. And it's like, I know, but unfortunately I might have to say to her, listen, we're going to have some boring workouts for a little bit, because, if we did a quote unquote boring one yesterday, it was mostly upper body. And by the end of it, she was like, oh yeah, I haven't thought about my back at all. And I was like, okay, good, I guess. We avoid, like you said, we don't want to avoid the area, but at least we can have success doing things like that. And then now it's just going, okay, what are the lower body exercises we can do that are successful, and maybe we just have to only do those, and then add one thing in and see if that triggers it. If it does, we take it back out again. If it doesn't, we keep it.
I mean, that's a great way to go.
It might just have to be, I'll just have to verbalize that to her and be like, listen, this is what we're doing. Just so she.
Well, you can always put the ball in her court so that she answers the question. Like, so what? Like, we're hitting some road bumps here about movement you can use that aren't boring. What in your world, what is not boring that you can push? And then draw her consciousness to the fact that there's actually probably quite a limited list. And like, I don't know what do you have any idea of what exercises might go into that list for her?
The only squats that we do with either like a foam roller behind her back or a fit ball, since she can stay upright. So it's like a hack squat, I guess, but she doesn't have one. So she's like always thinks that those are great because she never feels that. She can do a hamstring curl if she keeps her hips low, like again with a ball, as opposed to trying to hip extend.
Can she goblet squat? Can she goblet squat heels
elevated? I feel like we need we haven't tried heels elevated. The gym she's got in her apartment complex is quite limited, which is what's tough as well. But I did leave a block part of wedge at her place. So maybe I'll say try to bring that.
Mm.
Because I feel like that might be, something we need to work on, because that might help. She's okay when she does a static lunge. She was saying to me she thought maybe when we did a step back lunge, or the act of stepping back and forward, she was like, I feel like it's when I bring the leg back that maybe that's what, maybe she rotates when she does it.
Yeah.
So that was interesting that she said that. So I thought, okay, maybe step forward lunges are okay if we're walking, but something about stepping back for her, she thought might be triggering. So it's either has to be static.
Okay.
Split squats can be okay. It's just, again, typical things you would think would burn your glutes. Like even trying to teach her a strict hinge, she really tries to be quad dominant or extend her lumbar. So I've spent so much time, but then again, she just gets bored and frustrated. And they're like, oh, I have to think about so much. And it's like, I know, but you're the one that wants your glutes to work.
Yeah.
And I don't know how else to do it. So that's, yeah.
Try the half kneeling hinging, if you can get her one knee on a bench as well as in the middle ground. And the slouching split squat is another way that you might be able to get glutes, because you bring more knee dominance in as well. And if that's something that she leans into naturally anyway with the hack squat variations, that might be a good access point to the hips as well. And I think that's also why I think the heel elevated goblet squat might be an option, because when she's stacked, she seems happier, and you can still get a good glute stimulus without hinging, but getting hip flexion through the squat, and playing with the heel elevated goblet squat, because she can obviously reach forwards to help counterbalance to stay really upright. And then a progression of that would be the goblet split squat, heel elevated potentially, to help keep her back, her mass back. And that would be a nice bridging exercise back towards lunges, in that you get that stagger stance, one leg forward, one leg back, which is really important for creating space in the SI joint in motion. So think of it in those terms of like, she's happy doing the hack squat variations. Next step would be maybe heels elevated goblet squats, then heel elevated goblet split squats, and then see how you're going there. And like I said, all the half kneeling stuff that I said before can be used as warm-ups and rest periods for those exercises, and should really help get into that area in a low intensity way.
Okay, I'll try that tomorrow.
Let me know how you get on. Anything else on your mind for this client that I can help with? I think that's quite a lot to be going on with.
Yeah, I know. I think so. Yeah, the only thing would just be maybe if I get to talk to you again, would just be showing you some of the movements, and if you can see things that I'm missing. That's what I'm worrying about. I think she's quite, especially with her feet as well, she's quite paddle foot, especially on the right. She loves to sit on the outside. And so it was one glute stretch we were trying to do, and I was like, I feel like you shift your whole body, you don't know how to find your middle. So I've been trying to work on things like that. But again, I don't know whether you'd be like, oh, obviously she's doing X, Y, Z, or this. And I just have watched it so much now that I'm like, I don't know what else I could change.
If she's paddle footing, that will be a big part of this as well. So working on her pronation should be part of it. Like people like her hate pronation work, but sneaking it in somehow. The half kneeling setup is actually a great way to get some easy pronation in with 3 points of contact as well. You just have to be very strict on where her weight is, because it sounds like she would lean forwards and go to the forefoot and knee, whereas you need to stay upright, heel heavy, and in the hip more, and then slow down that anterior translation of the knee to get that journey from like the outside edge of the heel through towards the big toe as slow as possible, to help that foot unlock and maintain the contact. So it sounds like that half kneeling setup for her will be a great first thing to work on, because you can tweak it in so many different ways that will all help the things that she's struggling with at the moment.
Have you got more videos of half kneeling variations that you've done on online or on Instagram?
I do. I actually filmed some maybe a month or two ago. I'm not sure if they're on YouTube yet, but I'll send you the raw files if they're not. But yeah, the key thing is just thinking about the mechanics you would want in a lunge or in a hinge and recreating them in that setup. And the subtle things make a big difference for it. Like if you play around with it yourself, you'll feel like even just leaning forward slightly takes the stimulus away. Or if you're not keeping 3 points of contact through the foot, then it all goes into the quads. The width of the lunge, the toe out of the lunge, all of these things, small tweaks can make a big difference. So have a play with it yourself and then have an idea of what changes might improve things for her if she says, I'm not getting what we're looking for.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you.
No worries. Yeah, keep me posted. Let me know how you get on.
Yeah, I will.
And I'll end the recording here.
Sure.